Hi, my name is Heron, and can you tell my hair is a little bit frizzy today? It's raining outside, so I thought I would try a fun little activity today. I'm going to be doing a drawing tutorial with a really cute little reference image of a bonsai tree. That's when I'm drawing something new, the first step I like to take is to find a reference that I like so that I understand what this object genuinely looks like. Now, it's very important that you use a reference because you may think, well, hang on, I've seen a tree before. In fact, I have actually taught classes on how to make bonsai before. This should be an object that I'm very familiar with, right? But the funny thing about our memories, especially our visual memories, is that they are not very accurate. You might think you've seen this thing a million times before, and then you see a reference of it, you go, wait a second. That's not the shape I thought it was, that's not the color I thought it was, because nature is so complex. So always, always, always use a reference, folks. Okay, so here's our reference. I think it's a really cute little tree, and already I'm seeing some things because, when I taught bonsai making classes, we didn't use this type of tree. We used sort of a jade plant, and so this is a cherry tree, and it's got these really cool little pink flowers everywhere. It's also been bent in a whole bunch of different directions, which creates these nice, satisfying angles. And it's in this really cool sort of larger pot because it's probably a few feet tall, so it's larger than the bonsai I taught. So this will be a great reference for making something that's really elegant, really beautiful. Okay, so for this, we're going to need three things. We're going to need a piece of paper, which I used a piece of scrap paper. We're going to need a pen or a pencil, like this one. And we're going to need some markers, like these. And if you don't have any of these materials, I don't really think the material is what matters the most. I think it's all about the technique. So if you have some paint lying around, if you have, just a pen, follow along anyway. All right, so step one, most important step, find a reference. So here's my reference. You can just, do a quick Google search, bonsai tree, find one that you like. All right, good. Step number two, we're gonna start by sketching the shapes. So I'm going to break down this tree into a few different sort of larger shapes first, and then we'll break it down into smaller shapes later. So first we kind of want to go with, there's this sort of vague, rounded shape of the pot. We're just going to draw the general direction that the trunk is going, and then I'm going to add the bends later, because if you see the way that they've bent this tree, it sort of goes, in and out and in and out and then back up in the same direction. So just skip all that for now. Just draw like a nice sort of straight curved line, and then add the curves in after so that they line up correctly in the end. We're just gonna kind of create these general shapes of the branches, not getting too detailed, general large shapes of the flowers. So rather than trying to draw every single little tiny flower, we just create this broad generic shape, kind of implicit shape, not explicitly what it is. And then we're going to add the details in later after we put down a few layers of color. Alright, so step two, we're going to add some color. So this, we just want to be sort of a base layer of color. Now, because I'm using markers and I don't have any white paint pens with me, I'm not going to cover necessarily the entire shape. I'll leave a little bit on the sides roughly to imply a sort of highlight. If you're working with paint, if you have something where you can go in after and use your highlight, go for it. So we're just going to cover sort of most of this with whatever the sort of broad mid-tone color is. So for this one, I've got, a pink, I've got sort of like a lighter brown color for the bark, and then I decided to change the color of the pot so it stands out, make it a little more orange. So we're going to lay these flat colors down, and then once we've sort of blocked in these shapes with these large colors, we're going to add some shadow. So step 3, we add our shadow. So the shadow, I wanted to pick some slightly darker colors, but we're still staying within the same range. You could even use sort of like a blue something outside to make it pop a little more, but for this it had sort of a natural lighting, so I didn't want to go that far. So I chose a dark brown, and sort of like an orangey reddish for the pot, and just a slightly darker pink for the flowers. So you might notice that these flowers, they pick up a lot of highlight around the outside. So you might, if you know a thing or two about how to add light to a drawing, you might think, oh, well, the light, it comes from out of the canvas and we want to pull it in and it sort of hits things right on their face. But that's not always how light works, and that is why it's so important to use a reference. Because in this particular reference, the flowers, the pink little flowers, are so translucent, and they're at so many different angles that it sort of picks up light almost all around them. So rather than the light being up at the top where the light source is, and the shadow being down at the bottom, if we look at our reference, these pink flowers have a shadow more in the center. So they're sort of picking up a shadow from the light falling across the branch. They're in shadow because they're covering each other at a place in the center where there are more flowers. So pay close attention to where the shadow is, not just in relation to the light, but in the way that the objects scatter and allow the light to pass through them. Important detail to look out for. Alright, now our next step, if you're working with paint, would be to add some highlights. I'm just going to sort of leave it as is with these markers. So I'm going to jump ahead to our final step, which is to add some details. Now, I decided to go back over with my handy-dandy generic black pen, and what I did was I used the pen to add in some little details, particularly sort of the darkest darks. So I used it to add a little more shadow and a little more fine detail around the confines of the shapes, to contour those shapes more, make it more clear what they are. So I added in these sort of little wrinkles around where the branches had been intentionally bent. So you see sort of the bark is pushing up against itself and creating these almost skin-like little wrinkles. You see the flowers, I just contoured them in these sort of petal shapes, not even following the reference, but just giving a general idea that, oh yeah, these are flowers. I added a little bit of a sort of texture to the pot. So this pot, you know, it looks like it had these sort of lines going across it from where it was spun, where it was created on a pottery wheel. And so I sort of added in a little bit of texture to imply the shape of the pot it's in. And this does multiple things because it adds texture, but it also contours the shape itself. And anything that contours around the shape makes it look more three-dimensional. It implies the shape. And so this is very useful as a little detailing tip. If you ever want to make your shapes look more three-dimensional, try adding contour lines around the shape itself. And there you have it. We drew a beautiful bonsai cherry tree, a little miniature cherry tree. And again, it's not perfect. I didn't add in a ton of detail. It's just a nice, quick, easy sketch. But because we used that reference, because we used an actual object to reference against this, I think it came out pretty well. Alright, thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you had fun, maybe learned something today, and I hope you now have a cute little joyful cherry tree picture that you can use to remind yourself how great an artist you are. As always, take care, y'all. Be safe. I'll see you in the next one.